Welcome, everybody. I am truly honored to be here sharing this information with you. My name is Dave Miller. I am a former police officer and was a human trafficking investigator. I started Pursuit Pathways when I left the law enforcement world, and we are an education company that focuses on delivering human trafficking and child exploitation training and education, as well as active threat, active shooter response training for workplaces with a focus on healthcare, schools, retail, and other public spaces. But today we are here to discuss human trafficking and recognizing it and responding to it within event places or event spaces, and specifically with Avant Gardner. I want to be really clear from the start. This is not about a response to an incident that's happened on site. There have been no reports of human trafficking at Avant Gardner, and that's something that you should be extremely proud of. But that's exactly why we're here to have this conversation, because the best safety plans are the ones that you put in place before something actually even happens. As one of New York's premier event spaces, you welcome in thousands of guests at every single event. Anywhere from 3,000 to 7,000 people pour out into your streets at the end of an event. And it creates a real window of vulnerability, which can happen or can begin inside during the start of an event. People can get separated from their group. They can approach the wrong rideshare, or they can be targeted by somebody who's just waiting and watching for that opportunity to come. And that's where you come in. Our goal today isn't to make anyone paranoid. It is to absolutely make you prepared to spot red flags, prepared to be able to trust your instincts, and take the right action if something doesn't feel right at all during an event that you're hosting. Because when it comes to safety, the best protection that Avant Gardner can have is a well-trained team that knows what to look for and how to respond. Something that you guys are doing so well in so many areas already. You're not just protecting guests, you're protecting each other, you're protecting your brand and the event community that you have built. As we dive in here, I want you to understand human trafficking. There's lots of common types of trafficking, but the two most prevalent ones are sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Sex trafficking is involved when somebody is forced, tricked, or coerced into performing sex acts for money or something else of value. It can involve minors, it can involve adults, and it's considered trafficking even if the victim initially agreed, especially when force, fraud, or coercion is involved. If the person is under 18 years of age, no coercion needs to be proven. It's automatically considered trafficking. And the other is labor trafficking. Labor trafficking involves individuals being forced or deceived into working under unfair, unsafe, or exploitative conditions, often for very little or no pay at all. Victims might be told that they owe a debt, they might be threatened with deportation or manipulated into thinking that they can't leave their job at all. And in 2024, NASDAQ Verifin reported in their 2024 Global Financial Crime Report that trafficking or human trafficking is a $330 billion a year industry. And I know that that right there alone is a figure that is hard to imagine, but I want you to start thinking about what could it really be, because it's so highly underreported. These are best guesses at absolute best. We really truly don't know what that number could be. And when it comes to human trafficking, there's a lot of misconceptions. The first one that people always assume is that somebody's being kidnapped or held in chains or put into a shipping container and sent overseas somewhere, but that's usually not the case. Okay, that might be in international trafficking, but human trafficking is a domestic related offense where it's happening in our own backyards. It often looks like somebody's in a relationship. The trafficker might appear to be a romantic partner of somebody, a friend, or sometimes even a parent figure. To an outsider, it's something that can look completely consensual. So as I said, it's not an overseas problem. It's happening in our own backyards all across the country. The next one is understanding the difference between trafficking and smuggling. Human trafficking and human smuggling are two different things. Trafficking is about exploitation. using another person for profit through that control and manipulation that I just explained, often without crossing any borders at all, where smuggling is about movement and somebody who is willingly being transported usually cross an international border. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody who is being willingly transported or smuggled is not later forced into human trafficking. Another thing that we often hear is, how prevalent is it really? It's not something that only happens when we see it in the news or hear reports of it. It is happening every single day. I can almost guarantee you that you drive past it every single day on your way to and from work or wherever it is that you're going. Most people assume that it's just women and girls who are trafficked. Victims can be of any sexual orientation, any age, any race, any gender. It does not discriminate based on any of these things. And the key component of it all is exploitation. At the heart of all forms of trafficking is exploitation. Whether it's sex, labor, other services, a victim is being used against their will for somebody else's financial gain. And it often involves physical threats, that emotional manipulation, or financial control. But because it can be so inconspicuous, it is so difficult to know when it's happening. But I can assure you it is happening well beyond the times that the news reports on it. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So let's start to look at who is vulnerable. And we're going to build this into everything that you need to know for your event space. But when we talk about human trafficking, it's important to understand who is most at risk, because traffickers intentionally look for vulnerability. Often it can be minors or runaway youth or teenagers. They're targeted because they're impressionable, they're easy to manipulate. Runaway youth and unaccompanied minors may not have strong support systems put in place. They can often lack safe housing or income, which makes them easy to exploit. Can include immigrants, especially those without documentation or strong language skills, that they can be coerced with threats of deportation or false promises of work. Oftentimes, if they're new to the country, their passports will be confiscated from them. We're looking at people who may be struggling with substance abuse or mental health challenges. They're often targeted because their focus is on survival, not on safety. Or individuals may be even experiencing housing insecurity. They don't know where they're going to sleep next. They can be highly vulnerable to these. But really, it can be absolutely anyone. It does not discriminate. If anybody is lacking attention, love, support in their life, traffickers are absolutely amazing at their craft, and they can turn anyone into a victim that is unsuspecting. So someone who maybe meets an individual at an event doesn't leave with them and is forced into trafficking immediately. That's just the first step in earning their trust before they force them into this and manipulate them. So let's look at how this connects to events at Avant Gardner. You have large, crowded nightlife, music events. It can unintentionally attract traffickers. Big crowds and chaotic environments provide cover. Traffickers will blend in. Guests can be focused on the show or the fun and not their surroundings. You have thousands of people leaving all at once in a rush. They're disoriented, they're intoxicated, maybe they got separated from their friends. These are all ideal conditions for traffickers to approach someone, offer them a ride, offer them assistance, maybe even a place to stay for the night, and it may not even raise any red flags with somebody. And on the labor side, venues that use seasonal or high turnover staff can be vulnerable too, because if people are out of work based on a season, some traffickers are going to exploit people under that radar by forcing them to work under threats, fake documentation, fear of losing their immigration status, especially in support roles that people work in. So that's something that you need to keep an eye on if you have people that are working within your organization and there's seasonal work when you have a peak season. What happens? Where are they going during the off season? The key takeaway here is that events can become a very target-rich environment for traffickers But with awareness, we can flip that and make it much harder for them to be able to achieve this. When most people hear the word trafficker, they imagine a scary man in a van snatching people off the street, right? And we talked about that it's not a kidnapping and putting people in chains and doing all those things. It's a stereotype that's dangerously misleading, okay? One trafficker profile here, it can be family-based. It can be a parent, a sibling, an aunt or an uncle. They could be trafficking a child or a relative. They're motivated by a financial need. They have addictions, or maybe there's a criminal coercion element behind it. Victims often in these situations, they feel intense shame or loyalty to that family member, making them a lot less likely to report it. It can equally just be a peer or a friend. Somebody who appears as a trusted friend, a classmate, or someone close in their age range. They groom a victim into exploitation subtly, often seen in teen-on-teen recruitment, and it may be under the direction of another trafficker or doing it independently. I won't go down a big rabbit hole here, but this was one of Jeffrey Epstein's biggest MOs in the way he did it, is he would bring youth teens in, and then they would start to recruit their friends for him. You have what's called a Romeo pimp. They work on seduction and emotional manipulation, and events are a great place for them to meet prospective victims. They will pretend to be a loving partner or boyfriend to somebody. They build emotional dependency with somebody, and then they introduce the exploitation and the force into trafficking. It's often commonly seen in teen and young adult victims in this case. And then there's a sudden control over somebody's appearance, their finances, or their movements. And you're going to see as we go through each of these different profiles how they kind of interconnect, and one can lead right to another. We'll tie it all together for you. The next one is what's called a guerrilla pimp. They use violence and fear as their main tactic to force somebody into trafficking. Lots of physical abuse, lots of threats, lots of intimidation to control their victims. They focus on complete dominance and forced compliance. They are in high control of their trafficking situations, and red flags that you may see in victims are that they have visible bruises, a lot of fearfulness, they're flinching when they're being approached, they're deferring away from a person. So those are things that you can look for in possibly those situations. Another one is the CEO or the business pimp. They're very professional. They have lots of promises of financial gain. They will claim to be a manager, an agent. They're recruiting for modeling, music, or events. They will lure a victim in with job offers, contracts, auditions, and it is very common to see in the urban nightlife, entertainment, and social media area. They produce offers that are too good to be true. Lots of flashy promises, but there's really a lack of clear company info of what it is that they do. Another one here is the bottom girl, and this kind of ties back to the Jeffrey Epstein example that I gave. A bottom girl is a victim turned trafficker promoted to manage others. They're often seen as the top-level trafficker, the guerrilla pimp, the CEO, the Romeo pimp. They're often seen as their favorite and most trusted. And this person now is going to be in charge of recruiting, training, or controlling new victims to earn favor or to avoid violence. They can be both a victim and an enforcer in trafficking rings. It can be very, very unsuspecting because in a public venue like Avant Gardner, they're going to appear to be very friendly towards one another. And that's something that you can watch out for. If you see two women that are extremely friendly towards one another, that may be a big clue for you. Online predator and digital trafficker. They initiate contact and groom somebody over social media, gaming, or dating apps. They build a digital relationship with somebody, gather private information, and then the coercion and the force happens. They may use what's called sextortion, which is threatening to release private photos or intimate images of the person that they've gained to get control over them. They may use social media to initiate their first meeting, which could be at events. And this also, the online predator, digital trafficker, ties back to somebody that's a Romeo pimp, where they build that love, trust, and respect with somebody first. So one thing that you guys can do and watch out for in event spaces like yours is if you start to see the same individuals hanging around, but every week they're maybe with somebody new, or they're often seen appearing to be approaching many different people until they get one to engage. So no matter what your role is there, that is something that you can watch out for, is just familiar faces and their behavior. I want to talk about, for you, recognizing the signs of trafficking and red flags that you may see in guests. You may notice somebody who seems like they're being controlled and they won't speak for themselves. They might constantly look to somebody else for permission to answer, or they avoid eye contact with you altogether. Think of somebody who's ordering a drink or asking for directions in a venue. They don't control their own money. They might have the purse, they might have the clutch, the handbag, anything like that that they need, but they actually don't have money. They don't have credit cards or debit cards. They don't have ID. So if you're asking somebody to ID them for a drink, maybe they don't have it because that's been taken away from them. Red flags could include showing signs of fear, injuries, tattoos, branding. Okay, they may do things like flinching when they're touched. They're walking with their head down. Some guests may not even know where they are. They might not know the name of the venue, the event, or who they came with. And a big one, they're being shadowed or closely watched by somebody who seems to be overly possessive or controlling. This person may even answer for them or physically steer them around. There's red flags in your surroundings as well. You might spot individuals loitering around exits or other vulnerable areas that are isolated within your facility. Think of places like a coat check, parking lots, or bathrooms, especially after the event ends, when the crowd is starting to thin out. You can look for suspicious vehicles that circle repeatedly or park in dark areas for long periods. That can be a sign, again, of somebody watching or waiting. And I know at Avant Gardner, you have a lot of squad cars outside after events, but they're busy doing other things and may not be on the lookout for these things. Pay attention to what you overhear. Conversations that may involve pressuring, manipulation, or trying to isolate somebody, especially if the person sounds intoxicated, confused, or scared. These are all things that should raise alarm bells with you. And finally, another thing you guys experience is a lot in the rideshare or cab area. There's a few key behaviors here that you can watch for. Sometimes traffickers may pose as drivers, or they could be gypsy cabs. Okay, they may not be actually with Uber or Lyft, and they often may be acting aggressively to try to recruit passengers by calling out or offering deals for them to take their ride. And again, if somebody's intoxicated or they've been separated for their friends and they just put the trust in saying that this is an Uber and they don't verify it, it opens up an opportunity. You could see guests being told things like from a driver, things like, just come with me, I've got a better ride, I've got a better price, especially if that guest seems unsure, hesitant, or separated from the group, like I said. And here's the golden rule that I want you to follow. If something feels off, pay attention to it. Your instincts are one of the most important tools that you have. Okay, so let's zoom in a little bit here and look more specifically at what can happen in your facility specifically, and where your greatest opportunity to prevent trafficking really is. Your most vulnerable window, as I said earlier, is right after an event ends. Thousands of people are leaving all at once. They're tired, intoxicated, trying to find their friends, their ride, or where they're going to next, or the next party. And that could be another thing too, is people being recruited to come to an after party. Okay, it's loud, it's crowded, it's fast moving. And for traffickers, that is the most perfect environment. I want you to remember that chaos provides cover. Okay, chaos provides cover for the trafficker themselves to be operating. But you guys have eyes everywhere. You're made up of multiple departments, and that gives you a major advantage. Every role, from door staff to bartenders to runners to coat check, okay, it plays a part in seeing what other people might miss. And don't forget your roles that interact closely with guests. Door staff, they see who's coming and going. Third-party security, they're on patrol, they're positioned to notice repeat patterns or repeat individuals. Bartenders, you can pick up on uncomfortable interactions, or you can be on a close eye for somebody looking to drug somebody's drink. Runners and support staff, you're often in the back areas where other people aren't. Okay? Coat check and restroom areas. Guests are often separated from the crowd and distracted here. Okay? One thing to really remember, guests will not report concerns directly. Most will not at all. They might be unsure of what they saw, they're too scared to speak up, or they're simply distracted. And that is why awareness is your first line of prevention. Awareness is your first line of prevention. What you notice and what you choose to act on, that's what actually keeps people safe. If you actually see something, say something. If something doesn't feel right, if somebody reaches out to you asking for your help, that means reporting immediately to your direct supervisor or a lead on your internal security team or management. Okay, be sure to follow Avant Gardner's own internal procedures when it comes to this, but do not try to confront or intervene directly with a suspected trafficker. It could absolutely escalate the situation. It could put the guest or yourself in danger, can ultimately do much more harm than good. Your job is not to investigate. Your job is to alert the right people so the situation can be handled safely. Now, if somebody comes to you directly, maybe they say they feel unsafe, and we're going to talk about some of this afterwards and some hand signals that you might pick up on from people, or they're being followed, or something just seems off. First of all, stay calm and listen. Don't overwhelm them with questions or showing signs of disbelief. Your number one job is just to listen, and don't make accusations. Then bring them immediately to your supervisor. Once you have the information and you're looking at if you can't protect that person in the moment or keep them safe, you're looking to get description of them, clothing descriptors, descriptions of the person that they are with, clothing descriptors, vehicles that they may have got into. Okay, the more information you have, the better. You can then report it to local police. You can contact the National Human Trafficking Hotline. It's something that's available 24/7. It's completely confidential. The number for that is on the screen there, but it's 1-888-373-7888. It is a great resource, even if you're ever unsure what to do. And I should say, like, this training here extends well beyond just in the workplace, right? It may apply when you're on the subway, when you're traveling through New York, when you're on vacation somewhere else. Like, take this and apply it into real world application in so many places. And of course, if there's immediate danger, if somebody looks like they're at risk of being harmed or abducted, call 911 without hesitation, or flag down police or one of the squad cars that are on site right outside of your event, okay? The biggest thing that I want you to remember here is you do not need to be an expert. You just need to act with care. You need to follow your right and proper internal reporting processes. Your awareness and your voice could be the reason that somebody gets the help that they need or that they don't get hurt. Now, I want to look at this from a local context, and we're going to go through some frequently asked questions as well. The first thing is people asking, has this actually happened here? Has this happened at Avant Gardner? I saw a thing on Reddit and there was a big social media thing about it. The short answer is no, but not that you're aware of. It doesn't mean that it hasn't happened, and that's to no fault of anybody there. But there have been no known trafficking incidents at Avant Gardner, and that's a fantastic thing. But the fact that it hasn't happened, it doesn't yet mean that the risk is not real. Okay. You are in Brooklyn. You're in one of the most busiest, densely populated areas in the country. New York City itself is considered a very high-risk region for human trafficking for both sex and labor trafficking due to its size, transit access, and overall economic diversity. This training, again, just as a reminder, is not in response to an incident. It is a proactive strategy so you can stay one step ahead. And another question that we hear is, or that I've been asked before, is what if I'm wrong? What if somebody gets falsely accused of something? And that's a very valid concern. And that's why this training isn't about confrontation and going and confronting somebody about trafficking. It's not about labeling somebody or jumping to conclusions. It's about recognizing patterns and red flags and knowing what to do and how to report those observations appropriately. We don't expect anybody to act alone. We want everybody to stay aware and follow all of your internal reporting channels. And that's what creates safety without judgment and without assumptions. But if you're curious about Brooklyn itself and specific stats related to Brooklyn, in 2023, New York State itself, and we'll tie this back to Brooklyn, but New York State itself reported 412 human trafficking cases involving 845 victims. And while this number encompasses the entire New York State, it was highly proportionate to New York City, okay, including Brooklyn. But remember, this is only what is reported or caught. Okay, you've all seen that image before of like the iceberg out of the water and you just see the tip, but underneath is where 90% of that iceberg lives. I want you to take that mentality and think about human trafficking in that regards. Okay, there's open air sex markets such as East New York's Penn Track, and there's been a proliferation and a higher reporting number of open air sex markets popping up with reports of prostitutes openly soliciting customers. And it's raised concerns about potential human trafficking activity in these neighborhoods because it's out in the open. And another question here shortly, I'm going to address the topics of consensual prostitution and whatnot. But even without the data, the reality here is very clear. You have big cities and big risks. Okay. This is about protecting your guests and protecting your reputation before something happens. And the best way to do that is through this awareness. Here's some other frequently asked questions. Is human trafficking always related to sex work? No, labor trafficking is just as prevalent. Labor trafficking includes domestic servitude. It's common seen in construction, agriculture, hospitality, okay? But both types, both sex trafficking and labor trafficking, rely on exploitation. Can men and boys be victims of trafficking? Absolutely. While women and girls are more frequently trafficked for a sexual purpose, men and boys are often trafficked for labor or exploited through forced criminal activity, but they are also trafficked for a sexual purpose, especially boys that are minors, that are youth. Okay, so just be aware that that is something that happens. Do all victims come from low income or marginalized backgrounds? Absolutely not. Traffickers can target people from all walks of life, including middle class or affluent individuals, especially through emotional manipulation or false promises. So when we looked at the different trafficker profiles, your Romeo pimp, your gorilla pimp, your CEO business type of pimp, right? All of them use that emotional manipulation and sense of false promises, with the gorilla pimp leaning more heavily on the physical force. Why don't victims just leave? Many victims feel trapped out of fear, trauma. They bond with the trafficker. There's threats made towards their families. They have a lack of resources, or because they've been conditioned to believe that they have absolutely no other options. They don't know the way out. And even when law enforcement investigates these, victims have been trained what to say and how to respond to law enforcement and to give them no information. The best thing that law enforcement often can do is treat that individual with the most dignity possible because it leaves an open door for them. And take that away for yourselves because a victim's not just going to come up to you and tell you, hey, I'm being trafficked, help me out. Like that's very rare unless they're at that absolute breaking point. The best thing you can ever do is leave somebody intact with their dignity. You are a human being, they are a human being, and treat them as such. That creates an open door and starts to form that trust with you where one day they may come to you and say, I need your help. Is human trafficking the same as prostitution? And we just talked about this with the East Penn track. No, prostitution often involves consensual sex work. I know it's a term that we throw around, prostitution, hooker, lady of the night, these kinds of things. Where trafficking involves force, fraud, or coercion, consent's irrelevant when those factors are present. So if somebody's been forced into doing this, consent is irrelevant. Consent means nothing if somebody is forcing me to do something. So be mindful of those things, but there are people out there who do choose to earn a living through sex work. So no, they are not both one and the same thing. But that said, somebody who is being human trafficked and their profiles, if you can find profiles online or in purpose, they may tell you that they're doing it consensually, but that's something that they've been groomed and trained to say in response to somebody asking them if they're being trafficked. How do traffickers use debt as control? Absolutely. Victims are often told that they owe money for housing, transportation. They're forced to work to pay it off. And it's a tactic which is called debt bondage. So what often will happen when you look at those Romeo pimps, CEO pimps, all these different things, they'll bring people in, they'll have them do some work for them, they'll provide housing for them, and they treat it as though they're, creating a safe place. They'll buy them clothes, they'll provide them a vehicle, they'll do a lot of things. And then the fraud and the force starts, and they create what's called debt bondage, and they tell the person, hey, I've been doing all of these things for you. I've been providing you with drugs and alcohol and housing and clothing, and I've been taking care of you. It's time to pay that back. And if you don't pay it back, this is what's going to happen, right? I'm going to hurt your family. I'm going to hurt your children. I'm going to hurt your pets. I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to report you. I'm going to get you deported out of the country. All of these things happen. And the victim now is trapped in what is called debt bondage. And so that's how traffickers use debt as a form of control. How does trafficking intersect with domestic related violence or intimate partner violence? Traffickers often use patterns of control that's often seen the same as in abusive relationships, including isolation, threats, and emotional manipulation. Individuals who are in a relationship with another may be trafficked by that person for a sexual purpose. I saw it once where a female was posting online haircuts for men, but it also included sexual services. And it turned out that she was being forced into doing this by her husband and had been doing it for like 3 or 4 years before it finally came to light that her husband was trafficking her. And her husband was a well-known individual within their community that worked for a company. He was a sales rep, but he was doing this on the side. So it very much can intertwine and interact with domestic violence. Are there signs of trafficking in legal businesses? Yes. Trafficking can occur in nail salons, restaurants, agriculture, hospitality, okay? Victims may be forced into working excessive hours. They may be forced to live on site. They would appear to be fearful of their supervisors. They won't make eye contact with guests. They won't say much. They won't talk much. That's common. So just, and it doesn't mean every time that somebody behaves in that way, you check yourself into a hotel and you're walking down the hallway and somebody's working in the housekeeping staff. Don't jump to conclusions. Just be aware and know that it is something that happens. What's one of the biggest myths about trafficking? A lot of people think, and we addressed this at the start, that it always involves kidnapping. But in truth, most victims are recruited through manipulation and grooming and not forced abduction. And that grooming in that time period, it isn't somebody who just connects with you today or an individual today and tomorrow they're being trafficked. That grooming period takes time, and for everybody, it's different. It can be weeks, it can be months, it can be a year before somebody's forced into trafficking. And the best way or best image I can give you is like picture a big funnel. As long as a trafficker is putting names into the top of that funnel and out the bottom, a victim is coming out, they're winning. They don't need to recruit every single person that they come into contact with. So that's a big thing for you to think about, and that people that you may know, and for those who have children and everything like that, I think it takes parents sometimes, the stat is up to 18 months to realize that their child was being trafficked. It happens so slowly. And a big thing that can happen there too is if you have a child who is the average entry age into human trafficking is 13 years. So if you have 18 months that goes by and a child is 13, well, it's not going to be till they're 14 or 15 that a parent has finally realized that something's happening. But you're also trying to intertwine this with regular adolescence and growth that a child's going through. So just things to be very wary of, that it starts to increase. And if you are a parent, and you're looking for signs that it could be happening in your child, here's some things that you can take away from that are they don't have a job, but they're coming home with new shoes, new clothing, new purse with no reasonable explanation as to where it came from. They're often getting up and leaving your house with very little warning, saying, oh, I'm going over to so-and-so's house to study, or we got a project to work on. And they're up and gone, but you didn't know anything about this prior to. They have injuries that are unexplained, bruises, burn marks, things like that. Maybe you find out that they have a new boyfriend, but they're not bringing them around. Or if they do, that person seems to be very controlling over them. I know this expands outside of what we're here to talk about with Avant Gardner, but I know so many of you there probably are parents, or you have nieces and nephews, or you have younger siblings. So these are things that you can just watch, and I'm happy to take questions and answer that by anybody if you have questions specific to that. Is there a sign that victims can show asking for help? And there is. And it may be done very, very inconspicuously, but it is first, if somebody has their palm on a camera, it could be on a live stream, on a call. And speaking of that, right, think of things like OnlyFans and other online services like that. The human trafficking is happening there as well. But if somebody has their hand up, they tuck their thumb into their palm, and then their fingers come down like a closed fist over top. But it's done in one continuous motion. It's not a wave. It's not a repeated gesture. It's just one time, can just look like that. And it's not just trafficking specific. It's been used effectively by individuals who are experiencing traffic, domestic violence, or other forms of control. If somebody uses this sign, don't react visibly. Don't do it back to them. I see you over there. Hey, what's up? It's not like that, okay? That could increase their danger. Report it immediately to a supervisor, call 911, and just say, look, I think something's going on here. I got somebody in my venue that needs some help. Engage safely if it's possible by asking them yes, no questions, or directing them to a place of safety. Okay, you can pull that person away. If somebody's asking for your help and you don't find a way to intervene, you might have lost them. Easy example, if you're a bartender, if you're in coat check and you see this happen, and I look at my buddy next to me and I say, hey, Steve, keep an eye on her. I'll be right back. Don't take your eyes off that girl. I'm going to go get a security manager, whoever, and we're going to come up with a way to intervene. And I highly recommend with Avant Gardner that you look at what are ways that we can do this, right? Excuse me, we need to talk to you for a second. Or excuse me, sir, we have to take you out of the venue for whatever reason. Create that separation and deal with it afterwards, okay? But do it with the proper approach and using your on-site security, on-site police who may be there. This hand signal here, it gained a lot of international awareness thanks to viral TikTok videos, news coverage, and endorsements from things like UN for Women, domestic violence awareness campaigns, and a lot of things. But it's been adopted and taught all across North America, Europe, Latin America, Australia, and other regions, okay? So just know that if you see it, it's something that is going on. As we wrap up, this is our ACT formula. We traditionally use this formula in our active threat, active shooter response training, but I want to give it to you to apply towards what you do with Avant Gardner, okay? And it's assess, commit, take action, and debrief. So number one, assess your environment. Be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of guest behavior. Identify vulnerable areas. Again, your exits, your coat check, your rideshare, your bathrooms. Notice somebody who might look afraid, isolated, intoxicated, or controlled. Your goal is to build consistent situational awareness so staff know what normal looks like and recognize what's not. When it comes to commit yourself to protecting your guests and protecting your community. Commit to being a protector, not a bystander. And this means promising to act when something feels off, even if it's subtle. Okay? Stay aligned with a culture of safety and that you're there to protect and intervene appropriately when needed. Commitment looks like choosing to speak up, watching out for each other, trusting your gut, and taking this training seriously. Know that it is happening. Okay? If a team member sees somebody being shadowed and makes the choice to act rather than hope it's resolved on its own or it goes away. Again, see something, say something. And that brings us to take action and take safe action. Do what is appropriate for your role. Unless you're trained in security, law enforcement, or you're working with them, please don't ever confront somebody directly. Escort a guest to a safer area. Alert a supervisor or internal security discreetly, and keep the guest engaged and calm if they've disclosed something to you. Okay? Safe action is smart action. And lastly, debrief and document. After a situation happens, meet with a lead or manager. Document what happened, even if it seemed like something that was so minor. You learn from documenting these. Okay? Traffickers are going to test boundaries. And share your takeaways with your team. Strengthen your culture of awareness and response. As we wrap up this training, okay, I want to bring us back to the heart of why we're here. Human trafficking is real. It happens in big cities. We want to keep it where it's not happening at Avant Gardner. And everybody there plays a prime role in this by being proactive. Okay? Remember, you don't have to be an expert on this. You just have to stay aware. You have to trust your instincts. You have to follow the right channels when something feels off. You matter, your role matters, your awareness matters, and you may not ever know the impact of something that you notice or report, but you might be the reason that somebody gets home safe, okay? And that is something that you absolutely should be proud of. So I want to thank everybody for showing up for this training. It's been a pleasure to be able to provide this to you, to serve you. I want to invite anybody, if you have questions, please feel free to send me an email. It is dave@pursuitpathways.com. We have our email there as well, our website, pursuitpathways.com. And I hope to see you guys again in the near future and be able to continue to support Avant Gardner on being a safe and very exceptional events complex. Thank you guys. I appreciate this opportunity. We'll see you soon.